Good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. I just wanted to come in and introduce myself. I'm Dr. Warren Doctor. I'm the president and CEO of the East Tennessee Historical Society. I want to come down and welcome everybody. We're really excited you came out for our brown bag lecture. And a couple things I'd like to do before we get started is first of all to acknowledge that we have a new projector, and I just want to point out how bright it is, which I'm very excited about. This has been an odyssey. We've still got some more tech updates to do to the room, but it's coming along really well, as you can see, so I'm really pleased about that. And hopefully that shows up well for our viewers at home and on Zoom and so forth. And I'm sure that it will, won't it, Ken? He's nodding yes, so that's good. The next thing I'd like to do is just let some people know what's going on. This is it's great to have you here in December. We have recently just opened our latest exhibit, and I would like to encourage everyone to go see it. It's called Lights, Camera, East Tennessee, and it's about film and the role of film in East Tennessee history. It's really cool. We have a lot of really interesting pictures and some great stories about some of the local theaters that used to be here, for instance, the Gym Theater. And it's just really cool exhibit, and I just would like to encourage everyone to see it. The next thing I'd like to do is let you know that we also have a special presentation coming up on December 5th at 5 o'clock in the evening at the Bijou Theater. It's the first of what we call the Appalachian Sessions, which will be musicians from Appalachia coming in and playing Appalachian music and country music. We're also bringing in kids from surrounding counties, school children, high school kids, to come watch so that they can be exposed to Appalachian culture and heritage. And we're really excited about this, so I'd like to encourage everyone to go online and buy some tickets. I believe the tickets are $35, and so we're hoping that that'll be a lot of fun, and we're hoping that that's the first of many. The next, and I believe, just so you know, Mark Wills, I think, is our headliner for that. Is that right? Yes, Ken's nodding again. Ken, I'm looking to Ken. He says yes. And finally, if you're not a member of the East Tennessee Historical Society, I would like to encourage you to do so. Your membership means a great deal to us, and it helps us put on events like these. Now, our speaker, and I'm very excited about today's talk, and I brought things to take notes in. I'm deeply excited. So Paula Johnson will be speaking today on Eats and Eateries of Knoxville, and also we have her books here available for signing and for sale. If you'd like to learn more about the Eats and Eateries of Knoxville. She has written before on restaurants of Knoxville. She wrote a book called The Lost Restaurants of Knoxville. And this is a subject that's very near and dear to my heart because I love eating, as you can see. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn over to Paula. Thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon, and I would like to thank everyone for being here today. Those of you here in person, and also anyone joining us via Zoom or Facebook. Times have changed, and this is a wonderful new addition to all the events here at the East Tennessee History Center, so they can do some outreach to people who aren't able to come in person. And I would like to thank the East Tennessee History Center for hosting us today, and in particular, Lisa, Ken, Kelly, Tim, and Warren. And as I always tell my tour guests, the East Tennessee History Center is a fantastic place to visit. I hope you can also go through the museum or plan a time to come back if this is your first visit here. They host many interesting programs here, as well as provide resources for research in history and genealogy. So when my first book was published, I presented a brown bag lecture here, and my first book is The Lost Restaurants of Knoxville, and it's available in the gift shop here. At that time, the event was set up by the executive director, Cheryl Henderson. And while I was discussing the book, I only got through a few chapters, and I guess I spoke a little bit long on each chapter. So when the time was up, I made a little joke that, I would have to come back again to do part 2 of this book. And Cheryl said to me, well, when you write another book, you can come back again. So I wrote another book. But I was so sorry to hear about Cheryl's passing in July of this year, because she was a very great resource for the community and a very accomplished lady and very dedicated to continuing the history of East Tennessee. So if you don't know yet, I do have a business called the Knoxville Food Tours. So we will visit different restaurants around town, and I usually tell a history of the city as we're going from place to place. So many of my tour guests usually want to know, well, what prompted you to start writing books? Why did you want to write books about restaurants? And I always say, well, I didn't. It wasn't my idea to do these books. The first one, I was approached by the publisher. Now, both of these are in a series. So if you read this one and like it, you can get a book of the lost restaurants of Cincinnati or the lost restaurants of Louisville or different cities that you're interested in. So they were looking for someone to write a book about dining and restaurants in Knoxville. So I told some of my friends about this, and they said, Paula, is that some kind of a scam? I said, well, I don't know. But of course it wasn't a scam. And when the second book came about, this one came out about 5 years ago. This one is through a different publisher. So when they contacted me, then I knew right away that it was not a scam, and I was ready to take on another book. Although these are both about restaurants and dining in Knoxville, they are very different. The first book is kind of a history of dining from the very first tavern that was here in town through the decades up until the redevelopment of the downtown area in the early 2000s. So this reads more as history of the city. Now the new book is specifically about restaurants that are available to visit now and restaurants that are currently in business and operating. Over the holidays, one of my friends was very interested to look at the new book, and so she was flipping through and she said, oh, I haven't been there, I haven't been there, I haven't been there. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to every one of these places and check them off as we go. And I kind of laughed and I said, well, that is kind of the purpose of this book. This is kind of like your local dining guide around town. It's laid out by neighborhood. So if you enjoy supporting local businesses, this is a great resource for you. Whenever I was getting ready to turn the book in and eating around town, I kept a notebook. And so I'd always refer back to, when I was going out to grab something to eat, refer back to the restaurants that I hadn't been to in a while and wanted to visit again. So I thought what we would do today is just kind of take a look at some of these local restaurants that are featured in the book, and I would talk a little bit about each one. When I initially thought about writing this, I wanted to write a lot about what each restaurant serve, the types of food they serve. And the publisher said, well, no, we really want to know about the owners' backgrounds, and we want to know about your own experiences dining out around town. So here is the first picture in the book is a picture of a holiday drink. You can see the little poinsettia that I had. Does anyone have any idea where this picture might have been taken? At what restaurant?
Litton's?
Not Litton's. No. Copper Cellar on Cumberland. So you can see their their booths in the background, the wood ceiling that is so familiar to them, and the chandeliers, brass chandeliers. This book is dedicated to all of my friends and acquaintances in the hospitality industry and to all of their grandmas who taught them how to cook. That was the number one thing most people said was how they learned to cook was by being in the kitchen with their grandma. Shortly after we decided that we were going to do this book, the pandemic struck. So I thought, well, what in the world? We're going to do a book about restaurants during a global pandemic? Oh, my heavens. So, of course, at that time, most restaurant owners were not in the mood to talk about their restaurants. They were in the mood to see how they could continue operating and how they could continue making a living for themselves. So it took a while to get this going, but a lot of changes took place during that time. So most restaurant owners were very smart to think about doing carry-out orders, offering to-go family meals and outdoor seating if they could. So luckily, most restaurants did survive the pandemic in Knoxville. People in town are very loyal to their favorite places, and restaurant owners would tell me, you know, people would come in and they might buy a bunch of $50 gift certificates and that they never intended to use, just to help out. Or people would make a special point to order from their favorite restaurants 2 or 3 times a week. There are many beautiful and delicious dishes in Knoxville. I believe this one was from Babalu, the new Babalu. So, I don't know if you'll recognize some of these dishes. If you eat out a lot, you might. Here's a beautiful dessert from the Oliver Royale. This one in the center, J.C. Holdway. Amelia, Italian. This is a huge burger from Nick and Jay's, I believe. And Phi Thai Kitchen. Charcuterie board from Maple Hall, I believe. Shrimp and grits, of course, that's from the Southern Grit. Sushi, yes, Fin too. And breakfast plate, I believe it's Pete's, famous for their breakfast. Down at the bottom, scallops with a blackberry sauce. That's from Seasons at Turkey Creek. Crepes, of course, from the French Market. And they got me stuck on that one. Well, many locals that I talk to will tell me their favorite downtown restaurant is the Bistro at the Bijou. And to me, it is maybe the most important restaurant in Knoxville, simply because, well, for many reasons. It's housed in the 4th oldest building in town. That building was built in 1816 and has been used continuously as an eating and drinking establishment since that time. Of course, in 1980, preservationist Christopher Kendrick opened the Bistro, and so that would make it the longest running restaurant in downtown right now. It is currently owned by Martha Boggs, and the way she came about obtaining this restaurant is that when she went to college at UT, she worked in restaurants, working her way through college, and eventually she came to the Bistro and became the manager there. There's Martha in the middle. But the owners were never there. So eventually she got the opportunity to buy the Bistro. And it turned out to be a really great deal for her. Martha's and her husband have a 5-acre garden at their house, and he's a gardener. And I always said, I think that's the perfect relationship, gardener and restaurateur, because they can plan together things that he could grow that she can sell there in the restaurant. So she uses a lot of their own produce to create the chalkboard specials. And so in the photos, there's a beet hummus. Martha says that the Bistro is a place where you can come and eat really healthy or eat really bad. She does amazing burgers as well. Another great thing she does is the live jazz every week. So that will be on Friday and Saturday evenings. And then on Wednesdays, she has students and professors from the University of Tennessee come in, and that gives them an opportunity to play out in public. Now, in this book, I could only have 84 different little vignettes of restaurants. So what I did was, if there are restaurateurs that own more than one restaurant, I tried to include them in the same article. Martha also owns Dazzo's Italian restaurant, which is kind of right across the street from the Bijou. And Dazzo's, I'll mention a little bit more about it than what's here in the book. It was opened by a man who was from Long Island, and his name is Gavin Lawyer, but his mother's maiden name was Dazzo. So that's how he took the name of his place. But Gavin didn't really like his downtown location. He had a little trouble interacting with his customers because he had a very brusque personality about him. But Martha likes to support her neighbors, and she used to go over there all the time and order food from him to take home for dinner because she loved his cooking. So they became friends. And eventually, one day, he said to her, "Hey, why don't you just buy this place from me?" But she wouldn't do it. She didn't want to try to run 2 restaurants. But every time she would go over there, he would ask her to buy this place from him. So eventually, one day she said, "You know what? I think I will." And that's how she wound up with a second restaurant. But the best part about it was, when he sold it to her, he taught her all of his recipes. So she was able to keep the food that she loved and expand her business. Then, of course, Gavin went out to West Knoxville and opened a restaurant called Gavino's. And then he has a new one opening near Westtown Mall. I believe it's called Gibboni's, which will be, of course, another Italian restaurant. The Broadway Market began on Broadway, of course, and that's where I met the owners, Don and Lauren DeVore. I I had mentioned them in my first book because Don has been in the restaurant business around town for a long time. And they had a restaurant that I mentioned in this book called The Painted Table. So when they found out who I was with the book, then we became good friends. And it was always such a joy to visit with them because they were very aware of the dining scene around town. They knew all of the openings, all of the closings, all of the people involved in the restaurant world. And Don spoke very candidly about this, and of course I loved it. So it was always super fun to visit with them, and the food was amazing. So how they met was that Don said one day he was going to go down to the Strip at UT and go to the Ruby Tuesdays there because he wanted to meet some women. So he wound up meeting Lauren that night, and then the rest was history. But one thing that they told me that I didn't know was that they went out to Seattle in a van and lived in a tent for a while until Don got a job as a chef in a restaurant there. And they said, that was a little rough, but it was a great experience because at that time of our life, we were just so free. And it reminded me of that song, Free as We'll Ever Be, I think by the Zac Brown Band. But I went into the Broadway market. Oh, so they did move, and they moved to Hill Avenue, but they kept the name Broadway Market. And there was a young guy working there, and I thought, who is this kid? And then I thought, well, they're doing so well that they've been able to hire somebody to help them. And so I went up to the counter and I said, well, are Lauren and Don here? And he said, he kind of looked at me and he said, Lauren and Don aren't here anymore. And of course my heart broke. And he told me that he had bought the place from Don. Don had had some health problems, but he was on the mend, but decided to sell the Broadway market. So it is still open, but under new ownership. And I believe the new owner now calls it Broadway Market and Grill. So you can still visit there. Lauren is working for Cisco, I believe, as an account manager now. And I hope that Don is planning his big comeback for a new restaurant. Matt Robb's Biscuits and Brew. Matt Robbins is a good friend of mine. And we became friends when he was the manager of a coffee shop down in the Old City. Sometimes my tour goes into the Old City. So Matt worked at Remedy when it was there. Of course, Remedy has moved a little bit north, and that space has been taken over by a coffee shop called Awaken. But Matt is a very personable guy, and he had lots of friends there. He even got a girlfriend there, Nancy Wilson. So Nancy saw Matt doing all the managerial duties of the coffee shop, and she said to him, why don't you have your own place? And he said, well, I never thought about it. So from that point forward, they began working for Matt to have his own place. And his friendships with people around town came in handy because everything started just clicking and working out for him. His shop is in the building with the federal courthouse, which was the old Whittle Communications building. And it was the home of K-Brew. So Matt was friends with the owner of K-Brew, and they told him, we're moving out, but you can use all this equipment if you want to. So it just clicked into place. Nancy is sort of a marketing guru. She works for Tombras, and she helped Matt do his marketing. And he does a fantastic business there. He's only open for breakfast. He usually sells out by noon. So at the shop, he does all kinds of biscuits with various different toppings and coffees. So it has become a very popular place. The downtown deli is a little deli that was in the First Tennessee Bank building. And I became friends with the owner, David Grant, because, through Instagram. So he would be tagging the food tour on Instagram. And so one day I went in and met him. And he's a very colorful character, and he's so much fun. The way he got into the food business is that he lived out in California, and his neighbors were rock stars. So he would hang out with them, and they thought Dave was so much fun that they wanted to take him on tour with them. So they made him their touring bartender. And so the band that took him on tour was Great White. And if you're about my age, you would know who the band Great White is. One of those hair bands of the 80s. But one of the drinks he used to make for them, which I did not put this in here, but it was Kool-Aid mixed with wild turkey. So that was his introduction into the culinary world. But once he got involved with that, he decided that, he really liked this, and he wanted to go to school and study to become a chef. And so he did, and wound up cooking for presidents and just had a really great time. So how he got to Knoxville was that his son was living here, and he came out to visit. Now, this is the way a lot of people get to Knoxville. They have friends or family who live here. They come by and visit, and they see how beautiful it is, and they decide, well, this is a place for me. I'm going to live here too. Copita. I was at an event, and someone picked up this book and was flipping through it and saw Copita, and he said, "Oh, has Avi seen this?" And that is another thing that I want to stress about this book. This is a book about our friends and our neighbors. So he was a friend of Avi, who is the owner of Copita. And that is something that makes me happy every time I look through this book, because these are the people that we know around town. And if you frequent local restaurants, you will become friends with the owners. And so Avi is originally from Israel. His father was from Morocco. So when he came to town, this was his dream to bring this type of cuisine to the community. And he started out with a vegan restaurant, but then I guess he realized, oh, this is East Tennessee after all. I think we need to have some meat in here too. So he opened Copita Meat, and they were side by side each other on Gay Street, just across the street here. But then eventually he combined the two. Now, if you eat in a vegan sort of style, you can still do that because the food is prepared separately. But then Avi got the opportunity to move to a much larger space, so he's now in the Embassy Suites Hotel on the second level. And it's much more space, and it is a beautiful space. And the food is wonderful. You feel like it's a very healthy way of eating. Sometimes when I would take people there on the tour, it would be foods that maybe they were unfamiliar with, such as baba ganoush, fun to say, even more fun to eat, falafel, hummus, different types of Arabic salads. But once people would taste the food, they would say, "Oh my goodness, this is so delicious." So definitely try out Copita. Phi Thai Kitchen. So Phi Thai opened right beside Copita, and Phi started out in the food business with a food truck. And her truck was so popular that she decided to open a space on Gay Street. And the thing that I really loved about it is that she worked there with her family. So Phi's parents did most of the cooking. Her dad is a trained chef, and her dad cooked in a restaurant up in New York City, and the owner would keep pressing him to tell, how did you learn these dishes? Where did you get these recipes? And her dad would say, well, no, I just learned all this from my mother. So many of the recipes they have are passed down from Phi's grandmother. Her husband also worked with them in the kitchen. In the restaurant, not particularly in the kitchen. Now, Phi did some cooking, but she said she was always kind of frustrated because she could not cook as well as her dad did. So I noticed that she is now taking classes at the culinary school at Walter State. So when the lease ran out at Phi Thai, they have closed that space, but she's been operating out of a place called the Real Good Kitchen on Magnolia Avenue. So this is a commercial kitchen space that anyone can sign up to use so that they can still do catering and takeout orders there. But I'm really anxious to see what all happens in Phi's career, because she is a real go-getter, and of course the food is wonderful. Nama Sushi Bar. Well, the publishers of this book were very interested in the story of Greg White, the man who began Nama. And of course I was as well interested in his story. I featured a whole chapter about that in the first book of The Lost Restaurants of Knoxville. Nama started out as just a little tiny bar doing sushi, and of course that was the ultimate, most trendy thing that anyone had ever heard of in downtown Knoxville, so everyone wanted to go there. And it was very close to Harold's Deli. Harold Shersky had a Jewish deli there on the same street. And Greg White said that when he was working on opening, Harold was his biggest fan and his biggest supporter. And I thought, that's really neat, and that's really kind of a characteristic of Knoxville, for someone to take an interest in mentoring someone and encouraging them on their start out. The reason it was in the Lost Restaurants is because he had several other restaurants, La Costa and Nama was the one that people really took to, and it was the one that really stuck with Knoxville. So, of course, Greg White sold all of his restaurants, and Nama is now in a group of restaurants. And they also include Harvest, which is in Bearden. And they have opened a place downtown. The new Harvest downtown is a beautiful restaurant. It's on the 100 block. They have a place called Koyo, and that is what they call upscale or elevated Japanese dining. So the concept of Koyo is that you would go in and it would be a 4-course dinner prepared for you by the chefs, and you don't know what's coming out until it comes to your table. So that is fun for people who are on the adventurous side. Of course, you can go there for lunch and order off of a set menu. But they also have a restaurant called Wicked Chicken, which was on the 100 block, and it was, of course, fried chicken, which is so trendy right now. But they closed Wicked Chicken so that they could use that space for Harvest. But the Wicked Chicken concept moved back out to Farragut. In Farragut, there's a place called 35 North, I believe. And so the food is the menu of Wicked Chicken, and a little bit of Nama as well, because you can get sushi there too. So the world of restaurants is very much crisscrossing across town, across different concepts. So it's fun to follow. Cruz Farm, well, Colleen Cruz, she is a great example of a woman who decides what she wants and goes out and makes it happen. So Colleen really wanted to save her family farm. And the way she did it was by their milk production and turning that into a business, local business around town, providing milk to restaurants and supermarkets, and also ice cream. So everyone is in love with Cruz Farm ice cream. They have a certain style about them. And of course, one of my friends said, well, Colleen, she's a master marketer. So the whole idea of Cruz Farm is that this milk is from right here in the area. It's very wholesome and healthy, and the look is of the farm girl type look and family friendly. And her motto, of course, is work hard but love harder. So Colleen started with a booth at the farmer's market and was very successful with that, and then had a truck, and then had some temporary spaces around town during the summer until she really felt like, she could make a year-round go of this business. For a while, they were on Union Avenue, and during that time, I would take my tour there a lot, and we get, a scoop of ice cream. Well, eventually, some of the tour guests started questioning why I had 2 scoops of ice cream on my cone. I was like, beats me. I don't know. Maybe because I'm bringing lots of people by here every week. But we had a lot of fun with that. So now their permanent space is just down here on Gay Street. But they have opened and expanded. They have a place in Morristown now. They have a place in Sevierville. And the Asbury House, which is in East Knoxville. And right beside the house, they have what they call the Pizza Barn. which I think it would be great for her to bring the pizza barn idea to downtown too and have that available. One extra tidbit, I'll tell some extra things that may not be in this, but I won't, this is not a tell-all, but I will tell you some extra things. Colleen met her husband at the bistro at the Bijou. He was a cook there. And Martha said that Colleen would come in, to sell her milk, and she would act like she was talking to Martha, and she'd be looking back there in the kitchen. And so that's how she met her husband. The Phoenix Pharmacy and Fountain. Well, you can get ice cream in 3 different spots on the same block here in downtown, but nobody cares because everybody loves ice cream so much downtown. Now, this business came about because a few years ago, a survey was sent out to people who lived around the downtown area. And one of the questions was, what business or service do you think downtown needs to make it more fully livable? And one of the number 1 questions that kept coming up was a pharmacy. So this is a father and son run business. Ron Sherrill is a pharmacist who had never had a public pharmacy. He had worked in home health care. So in 2015, he decided to take on the challenge of opening a downtown pharmacy. And I think it has worked out great. They even do delivery for people who live around the area. So if you're feeling very bad and very sick and don't want to get out, they can bring your prescription to you. Now, Ron's son, Nolan, worked for the Defense Department in Washington, D.C. And it was a job he took shortly after 9/11. It was a job dealing with Homeland Security. So this ice cream shop was Nolan's idea of how he could get back home to Knoxville, do a job that was less stressful and more fun, and interact with people in the community. So that part opened in 2016. Most of the furnishings in the Phoenix Fountain are reclaimed from an old pharmacy out on Broadway. And Nolan's idea is that when you walk in, you will feel like it's a business that has been there forever. That there's really no time period to it. So some of my tour guests, they will pick up on that it's a recreation of an older look. But some of them do think, that is a pharmacy that has been there forever. They make all the, downstairs they have a commercial kitchen, so they make all of the ice cream there. And anything that they put in these amazing looking sundaes, cakes or cookies, is made there. The whipped cream, even syrups that they use in their drinks. Maple Hall, underground bowling. What a fun concept. So there is an area that people call the underground Knoxville that goes along the 100 block. But you can go underground and bowl and eat at the same time. This is a very popular business. If you want something that's not so loud and so packed with people, though, you can go to the Maple Room. So that is upstairs, but you enter from the back. So enter from the promenade side. And it's a beautiful space. It's usually very calm. You can eat the same food that you have downstairs in the bowling alley, but they also offer mocktails, and they do have huge
game boards. So like trivia and Scrabble. So if you want to take your friends out and do something fun, you can do that. You can also rent that space for a private event. During the pandemic, Babalu, who was located right beside Maple Hall, decided to close down permanently. And of course, then my heart was broken again. But many people loved Babalu. It was a very high energy type of place with a beautiful bar in the center, an open kitchen, lots of activity and energy. But they just decided, this pandemic, it's over. Well, the owners of Maple Hall decided, hey, maybe we could reopen Babalu. So they did, but they didn't open the very same Babalu. So the space was remodeled by an architecture and design firm that's local here, R2R Designs, and they do a lot of the design for restaurants in Knoxville and surrounding areas. So the new Babalu is a more subdued, calm type of place, but it is open again, so I'm happy about that. Suttree's High Gravity Tavern. High gravity, what's that all about? Well, it's about beer that has a higher percentage of alcohol. This business is run by Ann Ford and Matt Pachetti. And I became friends with them because before I started my food tour, every Sunday I would eat brunch at the Sunspot restaurant on the strip at the university. And they worked there as servers. And then at one point I had rented a house on Sutherland Avenue. When I moved out, Ann and Matt were the next tenants to come into the house. So it's like Regis was saying earlier, it's a small world. It's a small town. So after they had worked in restaurants for a long time and visited different cities and studied different concepts, they decided they wanted to open their own bar. And Suttree's is, of course, named for the character of a Cormac McCarthy book. Cormac McCarthy is an author, Pulitzer Prize-winning author who lived in Knoxville. And in the book, Suttree, the main character, Mr. Suttree, comes from a wealthy, well-to-do family. But he wanted to give it all up so he could go live on a boat on the river and kind of find himself, discover the meaning of his life. So Matt was a fan of this book, and that is who their bar is named after. One of the biggest selling items there is the ramen. So somebody recently asked me, do you have any ramen restaurants in Knoxville? I'm like, of course we do. We have everything in Knoxville. So the ramen is very delicious. They have kimchi that they get from some ladies who make it at the Oriental Market on Sutherland Avenue. Now, this is a sandwich pictured called the Royale with cheese. And that's another tip to a famous Knoxvillian, Quentin Tarantino, who produces movies. You may have seen the movie, I think it's in Pulp Fiction, where they talk about they're going to get a Royale with cheese. And the most important part, well, not the most important, but another important part, just beside the bar is the retro arcade. So you can go through the bar and restaurant to the arcade, where they have many, many old school games, pinball machines, and it's a very fun atmosphere. And that was a concept they had seen in another city and thought, oh, we would like to do that here. Stock and Barrel, of course, produces a burgers that will take you down. They will wipe you out. They're so amazing. This was opened by the Angelos brothers, Bill and Nico, and they are from Morristown. Their family did a lot of restaurants in Morristown. But the focus of Stock and Barrel is burgers and bourbon. And when I was doing research for the Lost Restaurants of Knoxville, I did a lot of research here at the History Center and in the evening. And many times when I would leave here, I would go have dinner at the Stock and Barrel. So I always think about that because a lot of times if I find a restaurant that I like to eat at, I want to try as many dishes on the menu as I can. Some people will say, well, whenever I go out, I always go to the same place and I always order the same dish because I know that's what I like. But I'm kind of the opposite of that. I always want to try something new and something different. So Stock and Barrel has wonderful burgers. But after they had had such a success with that concept, they wanted to try out tacos and tequila. So the Angelos opened Chivo, which Stock and Barrel is on Market Square. Chivo is on Gay Street. I call Chivo the local favorite. And somebody said, why do you call it the local favorite? And I said, well, because every time I go in there, there's always somebody I know eating there. So Chivo is a great favorite with locals. Try the brisket nachos. So delicious. Well, they have a third restaurant concept as well. They just recently opened on Market Square called the Brass Pearl. And this one focuses on seafood and oysters. So I think it's wonderful that they're always trying something new. Not all their restaurants are in the same style. They're all completely different. Also on Market Square are 3 restaurants that are owned by the same family that are really very consistently good restaurants. Not Watson's, Soccer Taco, and Myrtle's Chicken. So my friends always love to go to Soccer Taco. And that is their take on Mexican cuisine. Not Watson's has, I'm sure you've heard, this is a very cute story. The owner's mother used to always shop at Watson's department store downtown, which is in this space where the restaurant is now. And so it became like a running joke with them that every weekend she'd say, well, where are we going? And the kids would say, not Watson's. And so now they have to go to Watson's every day because they run a restaurant there. But it's a cute story. It's a great restaurant. Here you can see like a veggie burrito and fruit, scallops with grit cakes, fried green tomatoes, pimento cheese. And then they recently acquired Myrtle's. Myrtle's was opened by the man who was in the Nama restaurant group. And the restaurant before Myrtle's was Trio. So we used to go there a lot on the tour, but at that time it was brunch, soups and salads and sandwiches. But the lady who owned Trio was in this partnership with the man who, well, he wanted to change the concept to fried chicken and beer because that's so trendy right now. So they did. And that was shortly before the pandemic happened. So when everything shut down for the pandemic, they decided, well, we're not going to reopen Myrtle's. He had other restaurants, of course, and they were like, just forget it, just forget Myrtle's. Well, when people were doing the outdoor dining, Not Watson's started using the patio for some extra outdoor seating. And the manager there noticed people coming up, pulling on the door, and they would say, hey, what time does Myrtle's open? When is Myrtle's going to open? And it was so many people that did that he took notice, and he told the owner, and he said, I think you might ought to look into buying them out and reopening that place. So they did, and once everything started opening up again, Myrtle's just really took off. It turned out fried chicken and beer was what people wanted. And someone told me recently, we tried to go to Myrtle's, but we couldn't even get a seat there. So that was a good business move for them. But I think during that time of the pandemic, it was such a stressful time. A lot of people really didn't know what to do. They didn't know what was going to happen, and they didn't know what to do with their businesses. The Oliver Royale. This was the first article I wrote for this book, and I was just trying to get in the zone of writing. And I was thinking about the Oliver Royale because we go there a lot on the tour. And I had just seen an episode of The Office where they're talking about they needed to have a party, but it had to be really classy. And talking about different ideas, and would that be classy enough for their party? And I was thinking, well, the classiest place I know would be the Oliver Royale. And not simply because you walk in and see beautiful woodwork or marble top tables or basket weave tile. The thing that makes it classy is how they treat their guests. So it is a very small restaurant, but they try to, they do offer reservations, and they try to not overbook so that they can give their guests the time and attention that they need. This restaurant, like a lot of restaurants you go to, if you become a local, they know you, they greet you by name. So that was just a little funny, definitely classy, the Oliver Royale. And this is located in the Peter Kern building, which was built in 1875. It's a great chance to visit a historic building. And the Peter Kern building was always known as the best of everything because Peter Kern had a really great business there with his bread baking business. And so I think this is a very fitting tribute to that. The men who own the Oliver Royale are the ones who bought this building after Christopher Kendrick passed away. He had owned the building and had lived there for a while. So they remodeled the entire hotel part, which is upstairs. This building was turned into a hotel for the 1982 World's Fair. So when the ground space became available, they had been wanting to try to create their own restaurant. So they did, and I think they did a great job with their first restaurant. So here is brunch. Brunch is really great. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You can do brunch until 3, but then they do dinner every night of the week. So it seems like I'm going to have to plan another time to come back and talk about the rest of this book because we're running out of time. But Warren wanted to have some time when people can ask questions if they want to, and I would do my best to answer. So do we have any questions about restaurants around town? This does not only cover downtown, this covers all areas of town, North Knoxville, South, Cedar Bluff, Farragut area. Regis.
Yes, I'd like to put you on the spot. What is your favorite?
That is the most common question I get on the food tour. And so I always like to try to be diplomatic about that and say that I like different ones for different things. But I will tell you a few of my favorites. There's a new little Jewish deli that's opened in the Regus building called Potchkey. Some of you may have been there already. And the food is just so fresh, and the flavors are so vibrant and alive. I think Potchkey is a sweet dream, and I hope they stay there a long time. And another one of my current favorites is in the Bearden area, Pharmacy, and a lot of you may have eaten there. That was opened out west on North Shore. So at that time when it opened, it was a little narrow, tiny restaurant. And I couldn't really get into it because, I don't know, I was always so concerned about, I'm squished in here. I couldn't really focus on the food. So when they moved to Bearden, they have a much bigger space, and the food is wonderful. Bettina Hamblin is the owner. And she told me that Grady and Bill Regus took her, when she was looking for another space for Pharmacy, they took her out and drove her around town. And they all looked at spaces together, and they helped her decide where she should move to. So those are my two current favorites. Yes.
How do we find out about your tours?
Oh, yes. So I have a website. It's knoxvillefoodtours.com. And there's a calendar there that lists dates and times. But the tours are offered all year round. And right now we're doing Thursday, Friday, and Saturday afternoons. It usually runs from about 1 to 4 in the afternoon. And they are walking tours. And we visit several different places during the tour and do tastings at each place. So it is a lot of food. And then I usually tell a history about the city as we go from place to place. And it's a really fun time. It's a lot of people like to bring their friends and family if they have visitors coming in from out of town. And then I have visitors that come. Knoxville is becoming a destination city for many people to visit. So I have visitors from all over the country and all over the world, and they really love Knoxville. And they take such an interest in the city. They think it's so cute here and quaint. Yes.
I'll give you a tidbit on Cruise Farm. Sam Maynard, that runs the James White Fort, his family is a dairy. There was Maynard Dairies, so that's his family. And Sam says his relaxation time and way to relax is to go to Cruise Farms on Sunday afternoon and mix their chocolate for them to make all their chocolate milk, ice cream.
Oh.
That's just a relaxation thing for Sam. He loves to go to Cruise Farms and just mix the chocolate for them.
Very cool. And I love that. I love stories like that. And to me, that's Knoxville because, you know, everybody knows somebody. They say you're only 1 degree of separation from anyone in Knoxville. So I love stories like that. Lisa?
So if folks want to view the orientation video in the Voices of the Land exhibit, when that opened in 2008, the introductory video has different interviews with people from around the region and, around Knox County. Well, Colleen's grandfather is interviewed with all the cows coming into the barn and all that, and he talks about how they're preserving the land and how he intends that it be preserved for the future. And of course, she's in it, but in there that's before she has the idea of Cruz. And Cruz Farms Ice Cream. I just think it's really neat to hear his voice and his hope and dream on this, dairy farm, and then to see what she was able to do with it. So folks might want to take a look and watch the video again if they haven't had a chance in a while.
Yes, that is so interesting. I'd love to see what he thinks of how they've grown the business. Well, thank you all so much for coming today. As you can tell, I love to talk about restaurants, and I could do this for a long time. But you can read about them at your own leisure. Like they said, both of these books are available in the gift shop. And thanks for coming today.